This is a very condensed parasha in terms of the laws that are mentioned in the parasha. Some of them very intriguing, very strange even. So let's read the first paragraph. This is what the Torah talks about. When you take the field against your enemies and the Lord your God delivers them into your power, and you take some of them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her and will take her to wife, you shall bring her into your house, and you shall trim her nails, pare her nails, and discard her captive's guard. She shall spend a month's time in your house, lamenting her father and mother. After that you may come to her and possess her, and she shall be your wife. Then, should you no longer want her, you must release her outright. You must not sell her for money, since you had your will of her. You must not enslave her. So, on a superficial reading, it looks like a very strange, very weird law. The Torah allows a person who is at war to take a woman captive and to, in a sense, violate her. Because it's not done consensually. You will come to her, and the translation is to possess her, because the word Baal in Hebrew can mean sexual intercourse, also it means possession or ownership, like Baal Abayit, the owner of the house, Baal Abayit. And so it's a loaded term. It means both possession and sexual relationship and ownership. But the question is really, why would the Torah say that this is okay? So this is one case that we'll put aside, and we'll just continue to see what is the next law mentioned in the Torah. This is verses 15 to 17. The Torah speaks about a man who has two wives, one loved and the other unloved. And both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one. Difficult situations. A man has two children from two wives, and he loves more the son of the younger son, who's the son of the loved woman, the more favorite woman.
And very
reminiscent of Jacob, right? Yaakov and his wives. He has Rachel and Leah, and the term Ahuvah and Senuah is specifically mentioned regarding Rachel and Leah. In Bereshit, in the book of Genesis, we read that when after Yaakov married Rachel, so now he has two wives. Leah cheated him, and he married her, and then he married Rachel. It says in chapter 30, verse 31 of Bereshit, on page 59, Vayar Adonai ki senuah Leah, vayiftach et rahmah. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb. So, when you say that a man had two wives, and he loved one and he did not love the other, immediately we think of Yaakov and his two wives. So isn't it criticism of Yaakov? This is the question. And that leads to another question. Can we criticize the forefathers? So that if we read this criticism, then it seems like the Torah itself suggests it's okay. Yes, you could, not everything that the forefathers did was perfect. But when we come to the second concept of this paragraph, which is Lo yuchal levaker, in verse 16, when he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat as firstborn the son of the loved one in disregard of the son of the unloved one who is older. He cannot give preferential treatment to one of his children, which is exactly what Yaakov did. He preferred Yosef, the son of Rachel, the loved one, over Leah and her son Reuven. So this is another question that we have to look at, is what is the relationship of this story to the previous law and that to Yaakov. The next paragraph says the following: Ki yeh לאיש בן סורר ומורה, איננו שומע בקול אביו ובקול אמו, וייסרו אותו ולא ישמע עליהם. If a man has a wayward and defiant son, who does not heed his father or mother and does not obey them even after they discipline him, then what? His father and mother shall take all of him and bring him out to the elders of his town at the public place of his community, and they shall say to the elders, this son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not he is a glutton and a drunkard. Thereupon the man of his town shall stone him to death. A rare case of someone being stoned to death with no due process, no trial, no witnesses, and most importantly, no what? Before the trial and the witnesses and the process, what is missing? The defense of the judge, but the judge of what? The crime. What is the crime? What is the offense? He drinks, he eats, he's a glutton, he's a drunkard, he doesn't obey his mother and father. Does he transgress the commandment of honor your father and mother? And if so, we never saw that this prohibition carries the death penalty. Honor your father and mother, so you will inherit this divine blessing. But usually a positive commandment does not entail a punishment if you don't fulfill the mitzvah. The only mitzvah that the positive commandment, if one does not follow, will be punishable, is Pesach. If one does not keep Pesach, the Torah says he will be cut off. Some say that Milah also is in the same category, but even that is not punishable by a human court. So to have this situation of a man or a boy, I don't know how old this man is, was being brought to court and being told by the court, by the parents, the court is being told by the parents, we want you to execute our son. This is another very strange story here. So first let us go through the storyline without looking at the story of Yaakov, and then we'll go back and connect to Yaakov. And we'll see the one last paragraph here, verses 22 to 23. If a man is guilty of a capital offense and is put to death, and you impale him on a stake. This is the translation. We're not sure that this is what the original Hebrew meant. It means that the man is hung on a tree after that body is displayed on a pole or something like that, but not that he's being impaled on a stake. You must not let his corpse remain on the stake overnight, but must bury him the same day. For an impaled body is an affront to God. You shall not defile the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. It seems like all these laws are connected to each other. There's a sequence, there's a logical sequence here. The rabbis already pointed it out in the Midrash. They say the following: if a man takes a captive woman as a wife, he will end up hating her, and therefore he will have two wives: his original wife, Jewish wife, and the second one, the captive wife. He will love one and will hate the other, and therefore he will try to give preferential treatment to one of his sons. And since he cannot do that, the son will turn out to be a defiant, rebellious son, and he will be killed. And then all the laws that apply to someone who's been executed will apply to him as well. Okay, so this is the sequence that the Torah sees. Yes.
But hasn't that happened with all the forefathers in every story?
Right. So they're sort of. Yeah, right. Rich is asking about this. Didn't this happen with the forefathers, like all of the stories? And not necessarily the forefathers, but major characters in Tanakh, the protagonists of the Tanakh, went through stories like that. So if you go, for example, with the captive woman, even though we don't have a story that tells of someone who took a captive woman in war, but we have Abraham who takes a servant, a maidservant, and if she's a maidservant from Egypt, usually the maidservant, if she's not local, she's owned by the master of the house, is not of the same status of other people. And even in Hagar's case, it so happened that there was contention, there was strife, or of course there was friction in the household. Same thing with Yaakov and his two wives, Rachel and Leah. There's friction between them. There's friction between their children. The friction between their children leads to Yosef being sold as a slave to Egypt, to the same land where Hagar came from. In the case of Rachel and Leah, we even see this very interesting dialogue where who was the, let's put the question here, if we go back to Yaakov and Leah for a second. Who was the first cheater, or who was the first one to deceive others? When we think of the story of Yaakov, Rachel and Leah, who acted with deception? The father, no, Lavan. Okay, is Lavan the only one who's deceptive in the story? Leah is also deceptive, right? She deceives her future husband, right? We usually tend not to think of Leah, but there's a Hebrew poem about her, of how Yaakov wakes up in the morning and he sees her and he calls her name and she starts crying. Think of her situation, that she had to put herself in such a predicament. She's torn between her husband and her father. She has to pretend that she's not who she is, but she's also a trickster. She tricks her husband. But if we go, okay, before Lavan, who was the trickster before Lavan? Before Lavan tricked Yaakov, where did it come from? Yaakov himself is a trickster because he tricked his father into giving him the beracha that was meant for Esav. So we have a long chain of deception that happens in Bereshit.
I remember a few months ago reading the Masechet Ketubot, when a man with a woman, and he asked a question. So the fact that she stayed silent, that means she agreed. So actually, Leah didn't transgress anything. I mean, like when Yaakov went through I don't know, those days, the Surina, whatever they did, when everything was legal, but the fact that she kept quiet, he didn't say anything.
Legal is one thing, and honest is another.
Right.
There are a lot of things that people do, they say it's totally legal, but you should ask them, okay, so go tell the police you did that, right? Or go tell the court you did that. It's legal. No, okay, it falls somewhere within the dark crevices of the law where the eye of the law cannot see. But Leah, without Leah's cooperation, this could not have happened. This is another question that we have to ask when we do the circle and go back to Bereshit. But obviously what we see through the stories of Bereshit is that when there's lack of honesty and openness and transparency, there will be strife and there will be war and there will be disaster. It leads to slavery, it leads to the exile in Egypt, and it also shows us that the Torah in general is not in favor of bigamy. The relationship of one man with two women or more is bound to lead to disaster. It happens so with Abraham and his 2 wives, with Yaakov and his 4 wives, and later on with David and his 18 wives. King David had 18 wives, and what happens with them? He has a son, Adoniah, who wants to usurp the throne after his father's death, and is being killed by his brother. And then you have Avshalom, who during his father's lifetime tried to take over. And what do we read about Avshalom? The Navi tells us the story in the book of Shemuel that Avshalom kills his brother Amnon because Amnon violated his sister. So we have this as a result of having many wives and some of them not part of the Jewish people and being maybe taken in as captives. Avshalom kills Amnon. Eventually Avshalom comes back, they sort of reconcile, and ויהי מאחרי כן, ויעש לאבשלום מרכבה וסוסים, וחמישים איש רצים לפניו. Avshalom creates his own following and rebels against his father. Then regarding Adoniah, we later on read, Velo atzavot ve'aviv miyamav, that his father didn't rebuke him. So we definitely see some kind of a failure in the way David educated his children. And the Tanakh again insinuates that maybe it is because you have the clash between the father's culture and the many wives, each one with their own background and ideas that she brings into the household. Eventually the children grow up to go on a path that maybe is not desirable for the parents. Still, there are questions that bother us are, how does the Torah sanction the capture of a woman and taking her eventually as a wife? And then, how does the Torah sanction the execution of a boy, or even maybe an older person, for the sin of disobeying his parents, or being a glutton and a drunkard? So today we call him a juvenile, derelict, and you will send him to a facility or maybe to a foster family. But execution is, I think, is a little extreme. So let's go back to the first paragraph. So when the Torah says, "Ki tetze lemilchama oivecha," when it so happens that you take the field against your enemies, you will take captives. It's not a commandment. It's not a commandment. In other places we see that the commentators argue, and Maimonides is of the opinion that with every nation that you go to war with, you first must offer the option of having a peace treaty. If this doesn't happen, then you go to war. You're not obligated to take anyone as captive. But the Torah says that we know it's going to happen. It's human nature. And that's one of the things that we have to remember when we read the biblical law. The Torah works with the people, not against the people. If you try to educate people to do things that are completely against their nature, they're going to rebel against it. So we take, for example, slavery. Is the Torah in favor of slavery or against slavery? What would you say? Against slavery. Against slavery? Okay.
Why? If somebody wants to become a slave, what's wrong with that?
Right. If someone wants to be a slave, why not? Right? It seems like the Torah, on one hand, the Torah in general is against slavery, because we keep mentioning the exile, the Exodus, we came out of Egypt, Hashem delivered us from the house of bondage. But on the other hand, like Hamid says, if one wants to be a slave, the Torah says, okay, purchase him and let him be a slave. And they are right, and there's a whole set of laws regulating how we treat a slave. Right? So what happens there is the Torah knows that in that context, we're talking about 2,000, 3,000 years ago, telling people not to own slaves would not fly. People would not accept that. Because that was the way of the world. People owned slaves. So instead of going in a frontal attack against slavery, the Torah tries to regulate it. You will be allowed to have slaves, but you have to treat them with respect, with dignity, including letting them rest on Shabbat. That was a revolutionary idea. If you want an idea that shows us the Torah is divine, it's that idea. Because in ancient times, people either were free people or slaves. There was no middle ground. There was either you were a free man and you didn't have to work at all, or you worked at your own will, or you were slaves and you worked 24/7 until you dropped dead. That was the idea of slavery. But the Torah says if you own a slave, you should not harass the slave, you should not demand too much from the slave, you should take care of him. And even in our parasha, there's a halacha here. Lo tazkir abed el adonecha el adonav. If a slave runs away from his master, this is on page 424, verse 16 of chapter 23. לא תסגיר עבד אל אדוניו אשר ינצל אליך מעם אדוניו. You shall not turn over to his master a slave who seeks refuge with you from his master. There's a debate among the commentators on how to understand that, but the pshat, the literal meaning of the pasuk, suggests that we're talking about a non-Jewish slave, and which was viewed as a possession of the master. And with all that the Torah says, if that servant ran away from his master, he bought his freedom, and you should not turn him into the hands of his master. Right? So some people read this and say, "Wow, the Torah." They read some passages and say the Torah is in favor of slavery. But if you think of this in context of slavery in America and abolition, how people had to, but it's not too long ago. It's in recent memory that slavery was still considered okay in America. People still owned slaves. So it took thousands of years for humanity to realize that this is not okay. By the way, slavery is still practiced in America. Did you know that? Did anyone know that? Not as openly as it was before, but there are people, immigrants, who are being held against their will in private homes, they're not being let out. There's even in the religious community, there's a case of the Yemenite kids who've been imported to the Hasidic community of Satmar, and they were told, "We're going to bring you to America, we're going to give you a green card and citizenship," and they were basically, some of them are still held against their will. Nobody knows exactly where, but they work, they're afraid to go out. So there is slavery, and slavery in the world still exists. So before criticizing the Torah, saying the Torah is atavistic or it doesn't really belong in our times, we have to realize that this approach of the Torah is actually in line with the human mentality and trying to correct it over time instead of completely opposing it. So this is regarding slavery. Same here. Torah knows that people who go to war eventually will capture women and bring them home. So Torah tries to prevent a situation where that woman, where these women would be completely tortured or regarded as subhuman and then cast away. So the Torah wants the captor to do, let her shave her head as a sign of mourning. Let her, that here the translation is that she shall bear her nails, but also could mean to let her nails grow wild. Meaning that she would not take care of, she would not look that as pretty, as beautiful as she looked at war to you in that moment. Not only that, she's going to remove the garment that she wore when you captured her, where the translation is discard her captive's garb. And it makes us feel as the captive's garb is not that fancy, but actually it's the other way around. The clothes with which the soldier saw the woman the first time are whatever drove his imagination and his desire. Now we say, no, let her remove that. What is she going to wear if she's mourning her father and mother for a month? What is she wearing? Mourning clothes. Probably she's wearing sackcloth. This is what people wore. So now, this man who brought the woman to his house, thinking that he's going to have maybe a good time, now realizes that's not what he bargained for. Now he has a woman who sits there crying, mourning, and he has to tiptoe around her and maybe try to calm her down. This is not what he wanted. And as a result, the Torah says, only after that she could be your wife. Meaning you have to hold off. Don't try to fulfill your desire right away. Even though in rabbinic literature there's a debate on that. Some opinions say that he's allowed to have relationships with her at war. Others say, but the pasuk does not suggest that. If we go with the text, right, it seems that he is only allowed to be with her after this whole process. And as a result, what happened? And if you don't want her, which the Torah is almost as a prediction, it is bound to happen that you will not want her, because this is not what you wanted. Then you have to set her free. But you cannot sell her as a slave. Why? The Torah reads, the translation here reads, you have enslaved her. But the word inu is torture. You have already tortured her. That's the rebuke to the captor. You already took her captive. You already did with her what you wanted. Don't add to that. So, when we're from this perspective, the Torah is actually defending that woman, trying to take care of her. Now, is it possible that things got out of hand when people interpreted the law? Yes, that always happens. It always happens that people act on their own volition, on their own character traits and proclivities, and they do what they want, and they try to find refuge in the law. So we'll skip one paragraph for a second and look at the the famous case of the defiant son. That, as I said, it's suggested by the sequence that if the man insists on keeping that woman as his wife, they're not going to have a really marital peace. She's not going to love him. Maybe that's why the word ba'alta is mentioned, that you will take possession of her. She will always feel as an object. She was possessed by that man. She was owned by that man, and she will not love him. So the child that she bore to him, she wouldn't love that child, and the father wouldn't love that child. Maybe that is what will lead that child to be the best way, the defiant son. In any case, the rabbis looked at this section of the Torah and said there was never a best boy. It never happened. There was never a boy executed by his parents for being a drunkard and a glutton, for taking his father's car for a spin without permission, or for watching certain things on the internet without parental control. This never happened, right? Other rabbis say, not only it happened, I visited the gravesite. Ani yashavti al kivro. I sat at the gravesite, which is a very extreme statement. One says it never happened. That one says, oh, I really visited the place. I know where it was. So either one of them is not saying the truth. One of them is misinformed, right? The one who said it never happened seems to be on the wrong side because it's never happened. The other one sees it, so the grave says, maybe you just don't know that it happened, right? But maybe there's a different way to see it. How can we understand the Torah telling the parents, if you have problems with your child, bring him to Beit Din, we'll take care of him for you. How can we understand that the Torah would say that? Okay, so let me pose the question differently. What kind of parents would bring their child to court and ask for the court to execute their child?
Person who loves his child.
Who loves his child? Are you serious or? Okay, so.
We are not scared of courts and judges.
No, but it says here, the court will execute the child. The court will kill the child. And the parents know that because it's written in the Torah. Every year they go to Yerushalayim to hear the Torah, and the Torah says, if you have a problem with your child, nope, don't worry, bring him to court, we will get rid of him for you. This is what the Torah says. So now, you have a problem with your child at home, you say, he's a problem child, let me take him to court, the court will do my, what kind of parents are they?
When you
Do you understand what my question?
When you say we get rid of him,
Kill him.
we get rid of his bad thing.
No, it says, okay, read verse 21. U'gamu kol asher yiro ba'avanim v'met. Thereupon the men of his town shall stone him to death. To stone to death means that they according to rabbinic literature, they push him from a 2-story house and then throw stones over him. Okay?
Abraham tried to
Kill his son? That's Tuesday's class. You have to come next Tuesday. We have 3 more sessions. We have 3 more sessions on that. So I mean, again.
But it is a different system. Who is the father? Who is the mother? What kind of father and mother? You cannot be any father and mother to come and say.
So I'm asking you, if you.
This is a child.
Yeah.
I think the implication of that is necessarily that both parents have this equal responsibility to bring up the child.
Okay.
And if they bring up a child and the child is not doing well, one cannot say that it's not my responsibility.
Okay.
He did. And the other one say it's not my responsibility.
Okay.
One would say no, he's good, and the other one says it's bad.
Okay.
So both parents have to speak, be on the same page, and speak to each other in the same language, in the same tone, the same way, like unity when they talk to each other.
I think you're alluding
separate entities.
Okay. I think you're alluding to what the rabbi said, that the parents have to be on the same page, that they have to come together, that they have to say the words together, that the rabbis even went as far as saying they have to be of the same height, the same tone of voice, which is almost impossible. The rabbis rendered this whole halacha impractical. Okay, so I hear that, Sheldon.
Weren't there specific infractions that the child had to do in order to qualify for death?
Right. So the Torah doesn't say exactly what. The Torah says, Ben Soel boy, he's a defiant child, he does not obey, he disobeys his father and mother. Then it adds, when the parents speak, they say, our son is Zolel Vesoveh. The Talmud, or the Mishnah, wanted to quantify that, because this is what the Mishnah does. The Mishnah puts the measurements, the quantities and measurements for these laws of the Torah that are a little vague. The Torah says, "Eno hayav," he has to steal in order for him to be punishable. He must steal a certain amount of wine and meat from his parents and eat it somewhere else. If he eats it on his parents' property, it's not a transgression because it's their house and they have to feed him. But if he stole it from them and ate it in the neighbor's courtyard, then he'll be put to death. But that still leaves the question. Okay, let's say the father comes home, he opens the fridge, and he yells, "Mom, where's the steak? And where's the jug of wine I kept for dinner? It's not here, probably Robert ate it again," right? What? It's impossible. Okay, let's take him to court. You go to court, what is the problem? He ate my steak, drank my wine, please kill him. So what kind of parents? I'm asking, I just want to hear a description of the parents. Yes?
Rabbi, we often note that the Bible doesn't give the full story.
Right.
So what is missing here is what the parents have really said, and does the court render a decision before there's
Right.
death? There's a big gap missing here.
True. So this is a good point, that there are gaps in the biblical text. There are two types of gaps in the biblical text. One is a gap in the narrative, like we mentioned in the Akedah, that the journey of Abraham and Yitzhak over 3 days is described with very dry language, where you can put much more juice into it. And there are also gaps in the legal discussion, where we're not clear of exactly what is happening here. And this story is actually a key story in understanding that, which makes a lot of sense. When you hand a legal text to someone, that there is a guide for the more initiated, right? You can't expect from someone who comes to court to know what the judge knows or what the lawyer knows. Same way when you look at the textbook, there's the teacher's edition and there's the student's edition. And the teachers know a certain answer that, if the teacher doesn't know the answer to the math problem, he'll be in trouble. He must be able to solve the problem himself. That's another It's another way to look at it. But this story shows us that there was a secret code given to the judges and to whoever had the oral tradition to refer to in certain cases. This is one of the best examples. And so, like Stanley mentioned, we don't have we don't see the due process. Like, when did the court reach a decision, and who are the parents? So I would say this: in today's reality, if I would have known of parents who would bring their son to court and ask for that, I would say that they're abusive parents. I would think that those parents, if they didn't have the option of the child being punished in court, they would punish him themselves. They just... Yes.
We have learned in Torah that hard parents,
Yes.
they are grown up with the children.
That's true. Sorry to tell you.
Think about David, King David.
His father was harsh to him.
Harsh, but he was very nice.
It was entangled with Bathsheba. It was entangled. His children had this case of one raping the other, and then the other one killing him, and then raping his mother's.
His children. I'm not talking about his children. I'm talking about David.
So when you say if David came up in a harsh environment, he didn't educate his children right away. But I don't want to deviate too much from the subject. What we see today, and that is agreed upon by educators, by psychologists, that using physical punishment with children gets you nowhere. I know. There's nothing. What greater physical punishment than putting someone to death? You finish with his physicality. He's not physical anymore. I mean, for a while it'll be physical, but then no more. But the old school was that anyone who did something wrong will be punished physically, with a stick, with a whip, with a slap on the wrist. Today, finally, psychologists understand that this is not the case. Yes, sometimes a parent must engage in a physical action to save his child. Right? If I see that the child is about to stick a fork into the outlet, I'm not going to stand there and say, honey, think about the consequences, right? I don't think that's the proper thing to do. No, of course, I'm going to run there and pull him away, and maybe he'll cry, okay, but I'll have to explain to him. But using physical force does not help. Some people refer to using emotional or spiritual harassment, religious harassment. That's also not good. The only thing we gain from it, when a parent uses physical force on a child, you know what the message the child receives? You're stronger than me, therefore I must obey you. But wait till I'll be stronger than you, and I'll show you who rules. So either that will be the child will grow up to be rebellious, or the child will be or the father will be so strong, or the parents will be so strong and so controlling that the child will end up being a rebel. Completely no identity, no self-control. Well, I want to get to this point, because otherwise we'll leave time for questions at the end of this. 1 second. So what I'm suggesting is this. And then I'm going in, following the commentary of Rabbi Sleman Sassoon and Haim Sassoon, which is that the parents are willing to bring their son to court and say, kill that son because he disobeys us. Our parents, and if they would have been left to their devices, they would have killed the son. And unfortunately, we know of cases like that. Even today in America, there were cases of parents who treat their kids horribly. Now, what the system in America is that if the court finds out about something like that, they will come and take the kid away from the parents. But this also is not always effective, because there are many situations where the system intervenes for no reason and tears families apart. The Torah found a way to deal with it. The Torah tells people publicly, If you have a problem with your child, bring him to court and we'll take care of him. Unbeknownst to the parents, the judges were told that beware, here we have problem parents. The problem is not with the child. The problem is with the parent. And the judges are told, if you have a case like that, make sure that you take custody over the child and save him from his parents. This is the secret code that was given to the judges. And that's why the rabbis say, this never happened. It never happened because whenever it came to court, the rabbis, the judges, the priests, whoever was in charge, found a way to make the child innocent, right, and to release him or even take custody and protect the child without the parents paying attention or finding out that this is what the court is doing. What Rabbi Yosef says, I said at the grave, he's trying to say something else. He's not trying to say, he cannot deny the statement of the other rabbis that this never happened, because they're describing a legal process. What he's trying to say is that he disagrees with the method, because maybe he agrees with some of the people here, that he says if you don't punish the child, eventually he will die in terrible circumstances, right? That this will come back and bite him. So Kivro, when he says he said on his grave, not on because this was done by court, but this was a natural consequence. But eventually, as the Jewish law received it, this never took place. But this brings us to think about other halachot. Are there any other cases like that where the Torah says A, but actually behind the scenes B is done? Right? Are there any other cases like that? But Jonathan, you had a question.
Yeah, but I think it's pretty similar to the cities of refuge, which it's meant to provide a safe haven. It's
Right.
also kind of admitting to the courts that you did something wrong. You know?
Right.
It's that kind of dual-
Just like we spoke about the cities of refuge, where the Torah says, here is a city of refuge. If you killed someone accidentally, run as fast as you can to the city of refuge before the Goel Adam, the Redeemer, the one who's going to take revenge, the one who's going to carry on the vendetta, finds you and kills you. So we said, well, this is a barbaric practice. You're going to let a relative kill the accidental killer without fair trial? The answer is no. The Torah knows that this is bound to happen, because he will be driven by passion, he will be hot-blooded, hot-headed. So I says, okay, let us make sure that the accidental killer comes to court, confesses, and gives himself in, and then we'll take it from there. So we have a similar case in this very parasha, and that is in the, we'll skip one moment to page 422, verse 13. And then we read the following. A man marries a woman and cohabits with her. Then he takes an aversion to her and makes up charges against her and defames her, saying, I married this woman, but when I approached her, I found that she was not a virgin. That's a very, very harsh accusation, especially in the environment of the Tanakh, where chastity was considered a virtue that one would die for. Right? Even today, there are some societies where if the parents suspect that their daughter dishonored the family, they would put her to death. In some Arab, some Muslim societies, this will be done, and even in the Jewish society. I think I mentioned it once. In the 16th to 17th century, Rabbi Moshe Isserles of Krakow in Poland received a question from a father who said, my daughter dishonored the family, am I allowed to kill her? So this is 300-400 years ago, post-medieval Europe. The rabbis of course said no. I hope they also sent some kind of surveillance to the father's house.
But is subject to Sahidah.
Who?
not Cohen, according to Haim, it's not here, but I mean, if what you just said,
who is that?
not Cohen, you know.
The Bat Kohen, the daughter of a Kohen. Okay, daughter of a Kohen is a different story. The daughter of a Kohen is mentioned in Vayikra, right? Uvat ish Kohen ki tehel liznot et aveh mehalelet ba'esh tisarev. If a daughter of a Kohen starts practicing prostitution, she desecrates her father, she'll be put to death by fire, she'll be burned to death. This, by the way, this pasuk left all the commentators, all the Talmudic commentators, the rabbis perplexed. Why is the daughter of the Kohen isolated? Why is she deserving a different law than a regular woman? So we must see it really in context of the laws of the Levites, or the laws of the priests, and we'll talk about it in a moment. But here, the Torah says that basically when this man comes with an accusation, they would take the woman out, the girl out to the gate of the city, and will bring evidence that whether she is or she's not a virgin. And if in reality she's not a virgin, she'll be put to death, right?
But she could have been virgin before she had this.
Right.
So now she may not be. So why put her to death?
Again, what's missing here is the evidence in the sense of the Al Pi Shnayim Edim. The Torah says previously, Al Pi Shnayim Edim, or Shosha Edim Yumat Amet, Yumat Al Pi Yad Echad. A man will not be put to death by one witness. You have to have at least 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses. And circumstantial evidence does not count. So for him to bring the simla, the text says that they spread the cloth before the elders. The rabbis did not like the tone of that, and they said it's not an actual cloth. They don't bring a garment. It means that they spread their argument. Just like you spread a tablecloth, so also they have to spread their argument. Historians who know the culture of the Near East say that it's a little different. Actually, in the ancient Near East, what today we refer to as the best men and bridesmaids were actually people who slept in the same room with the bride and groom, and would make sure that the marriage was consummated, and they would bring the garment for inspection on the following day to see that there was really evidence. But by the same token, the way we explain the Besor Moreh, the defiant son, we have to see that as well. That the fact that the man can bring the wife to court and say she is or she's not a virgin is to prevent him from taking the law into his hands. To make it something that depends on due process. That when they will bring it to court, right, of course it's written in a language that says either she is or she's not a virgin. Because if you tell the man, bring it to court and we will find ways to acquit her no matter what, he will not bring her to court. There were enough cases of abusive husbands who took their anger on their wives. So the Torah does it in that manner. And of course that, like I said, leads to the question, will we find other situations where the Torah tries to save someone, or that the rabbinical system, the judicial system knew of a sort of a secret code like that we're not aware of? Maybe it has been forgotten in the long years of us not having a judicial system. So questions so far? I know you had a question.
There's a 4 paragraphs here,
Yes.
connected, and then one leads to another. Can you look at it from Hekesh, what these 4 things have in common, these 4 cases?
Yes. Okay, I think
Would
that
that invite me to look at these?
what? Yes.
As opposed to...
Yeah, they all have in common. They're right. You can see there's a sequence, or you can see that there's a common thread. So we'll look at the common thread in a second. But Jonathan?
I was just going to comment on that. It seems like a comment about kind of a slippery slope. You know, have this relationship, which is a low fee, and then you have a hatred of marriage, and then you have a rebellious son, and you're burying someone. So it's like kind of absurd in the way that it just
Right.
gradually
It takes it right. But what? So I'll put both your statements together. There is a certain tendency that's being pushed to an extreme, and that is, I think, the concept of not being happy, not being content with what you have. So the first paragraph is, you go to war, you do what you have to do. It's a necessity. A war is a necessity. But then, you have this lust, this desire towards that woman. Now if you stop and think, that person stops and thinks. Right? He just went to war against his enemies. He destroyed them. Right? They were sworn enemies. They didn't like him. He didn't like them. What are the chances that that woman who comes from an alien nation that had animosity towards him before the war, and even more so after the war, would love him? Why would he want her? The only reason for him to want her is that he's not happy with what he has. He thinks that he could get satisfaction from that woman. Remember that song, I Can Get No Satisfaction? Okay? So that man can get no satisfaction. He wants to be satisfied by her, but it's not going to work for him. Because Torah says, eventually you'll send her away. Now, why would a man have two women? Please know that usually we don't find we usually don't look for that. So maybe it's the male ego, or
maybe Christiana, they went to war and they see he sees beautiful Bridget Bardot or Sharon Stone. The Torah warns you.
okay.
Before it comes, the Githa starts it from there. She's not going to be appealing to you
Right.
for that.
No, but with the two wives, why would someone, right? Why would someone have two wives?
Because sometimes one wife strengthens the other wife, relationship. Their love strengthens. I'm sure.
So before he married the second wife.
And Sarah, I'm sure Leah strengthened the relationship between Jacob and Rachel.
No, not according to the text. It was the other way around. She drove a wedge between them. She was like, when Reuven came with the flowers, the dudaim, mandrakes, whatever they are, and he comes and he offers them to his mother, and Rachel says, "Oh, can I have some of these?" And she says, not enough for you that you took my husband. Leah accused Rachel of taking. Definitely there's strife, there's war there. But I'm saying for the men, obviously he did not marry them simultaneously, right? He had a wife and then he married another wife. So obviously he felt like the first wife is not enough for him. The same with the Ben Sorel Borei. If he defies his parents, right? So they have a problem with both the parents and the kid. The son goes against his parents because he's not happy with his life circumstance or situation. He wants more, he doesn't want to obey them. And also the last thing, usually for a person to be driven to commit a sin or crime is because he's not satisfied with what he has. He wants to have more. And if he can't get it legally, he will get it illegally. And once he does that, he ends up being executed. So the common thread, I think, for all of them is that if one doesn't have the right pursuit in life, it will end with disaster. I want to tie it also to the speech I gave on the 10 Commandments. That remember that the way I explained it, the 10 Commandments start with Anochi Hashem Elohecha, having the awareness, knowing that God is the Creator and God gave us everything, and ends with Lo Tahmod, you shall not covet. But I read it not as you shall not covet, but that you would not. you would not covet. Because you cannot commend someone to not covet, to not want something else. But rather, the Torah says, if you understand your life as a series of blessings, you have your family, you have the Shabbat, you have God in your life. All these are beautiful blessings. Appreciate them. Don't try to take that which does not belong to others, and eventually it will lead you to being able to not covet. This is the greatest, I think the greatest achievement of mankind, of an individual, is to be at that state of mind of, I don't want what the other has. I'm fine with what I have. I'm perfectly fine. If we had that, we wouldn't have wars, we wouldn't have crime. 90% of the world's problems would have been erased if people would be able to reach that level of al-tahmud. So maybe this is what it's teaching us. Barnaby, you had a question?
Yes, I want to bring up a very prominent case where the Israelites actually picked up a very, I wouldn't say how large a population of virgin war captives. It was after Moab, Moab.
Yes.
And Balpeor said, kill all the males and the women who are not virgins.
Right.
And then, presumably we think that these young women will be taken to captivity.
Right. Right, so that's a good point. And when you look at the book of Midbar, in Parashat Matot, it says, "V'atem hu kol zachar batav, v'chol isha yoda'at." This is in chapter 31, verse 17 of Midbar. It's page 357. And Moshe says, "Kol atav b'nashim asher lo yad'u mishkav zachar, ahayu lachem." First, this is something that we have that a lot of people struggle with. I also struggle with the display of violence that we have in the Torah, in the Tanakh, when we go to war against our enemies, that we say annihilate the Amalek, annihilate other nations. How do we understand that? That's a difficult question. The difference between this text and what we read here is that here we talk about a woman who was mature and already available for the man, and here they talk about little younger children that are being kept alive. So they would be raised already as part of the Israelite household. To say that it's the appropriate thing to do, it's hard to say. I agree, it's difficult to say that. The only explanation that I can sort of come up with, and if anyone has a different explanation, I'll be glad to hear that, is that two things. One, that destroying Amalek and Midian was necessary for the establishment of monotheism. That without this happening, monotheism would never succeed, and because it would not succeed, all humanity would have been in danger of destruction. But still, I'm not fully happy with that. The other thing is to say that maybe there's an exaggeration in the description of the wars. Just like the great kings of Assyria and Babylonia would write that they killed hundreds of thousands of people, but in reality it was only the direct casualties of war. Maybe this is what really happens here, and we don't have all these casualties. But I don't know. Truly, this is a question that still grapples with.
They kill all the male children if it's about raising children in a proper environment.
Right, I agree. This I don't know. I don't know. It's a.
Unlike you, Rabbi,
Yes.
I do not see a problem with what is described there.
Okay. Why?
Because when I look at the situation between Israel and Palestine,
Right.
where a nation at the minute, Palestinians, are educating their children from the youngest age, not only to hate but to kill the others, there's only one answer, and that's the biblical answer. You take them all out. Now, it sounds awful,
Yeah.
but it seems to me that the solution that was raised there applies equally today to a nation that is totally consumed with hating.
Right. So that's the answer that I said. Maybe it is that without that, they would not be able to establish the Jewish nation. But to be fair, let's say that we were able to have full control of the Gaza Strip, right? Let's say that tomorrow, whatever there's a way that we can get rid of all the weapons in the West Bank, right? And now we go in, and there we find children, women, and men that we know are from that moment on, they're incapable of picking up a weapon. Maybe if they grow up, right, and be left to their devices. Would you feel comfortable putting everybody to death?
I wouldn't like it, but it's the only realistic solution. It's awful.
I say
because we live now in a far more civilized society. But the whole concept of rules of war is crazy.
I understand, but
Because
still,
war means civilization is broken down.
right? Well, we say when we're sitting here.
There's no rules of war.
They do.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So
they always claim.
but we say when we're sitting here. That's my question. We say when we're sitting here, but if we had to go from house to house in Gaza, right? After the city has been completely disarmed, and now we're in control, because remember we talk about people with conventional weapons, right? It's not that they're going to bomb someone or come. Then once you took them, They're yours, right? Would we be comfortable with the actual act?
No.
We would not. We would find it very difficult.
Extremely difficult. But
Right.
I'm saying it's because of the day that we live in.
Right.
But in those days, I understood it totally. I don't find it difficult to understand because the whole concept was wipe them out.
Okay. So I have Rich and was it? Yes.
I think what this gentleman is saying is that we are dealing with a nation
Yes.
that is rodef to kill.
Yes.
And according to Allah, if you know that's the case, then we have the obligation to kill them,
Right.
regardless. And I think what the Torah here is saying, if that's the case, then you end up killing all of the people, but you're prohibited from killing these people.
Right.
The rest you can do if they are rodef.
Right. But my question is, how do we apply collective punishment to people who are not in their own mind? They've been brainwashed. The children whose innocence was taken away. Yes, they have been brainwashed by the Palestinian propaganda. They've been told. I understand, but
they come and they.
I understand, but when you think of a child, we see children around 6, 7, 8 years old. Last week, I started watching a documentary, right? That Rich recommended to me. It's called the Jesus Camp. Sorry, it's always wrong. Jesus Camp, right? This camp that is being held in the Midwest. Was in Missouri. It was in Missouri, and the camp teaches kids about Jesus, how they have to proselytize and how. And it's nice. You think, okay, it's very nice that they walk up to someone and they say, you see an 8-year-old girl. She goes to the lane. She's playing bowling, and then she goes to a young woman there, and she says, "God told me that you need to have him in your life." And they all smile. And it's beautiful. It's very cute. But then you see them at camp. And their pastor, she's a children's pastor, says, she starts rebuking them. She says, "You go to school and you're all lies. You're fake." And those kids break down and cry. And I couldn't watch more than 30 minutes of that movie because you realize that they're taking advantage of kids who have they're so vulnerable to be grafted. So to say that this is a big problem. And I add one more thing to that, to what Stanley said about the civilized world, that we became civilized only only means of technology. We have better technology. So if the caveman had to use a club or an unpolished and unused stone to kill his opponent, maybe it would take him half an hour, right? How many people he would kill throughout his lifetime? 5, 10, 15, right? Today, modern day soldier, right? The pilot who dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with the press of a button, could kill 150,000 people. So we only became more sophisticated, and we drove that killing in the battlefield away from us. But still, it's a problem. Yeah, Rach.
I was going to say, one of the things when I was in Texas, I was working at a Christian fair one day, selling cell phones, and it was one of the places to go to sell. And we had a booth, and there were kids walking around that were 7, 8 years old with plastic fetuses, literally, because they were anti-abortion, whatever kind of thing. They're handing the kids these toys. I could not believe what I was seeing, but this happens in every religion. Judaism, we have our share of nutsos across the board. So I'm saying it's something, extremism is in every religion.
Right.
It's in
It's not that every person.
No, it's in
I think one other thing that I have when I deal with this kind of violence that we find in the Tanakh is that we see that for whatever reason it's mentioned, whether it is literal, it happened that way, whether it was necessary for whatever reason it is, we grew out of it. Meaning that the Torah has some kind of a corrective mechanism that always takes us back to more normal perspective. That even if we say, this is what we must do, eventually we don't do that. Even if that is the mechanism of the concept of Tzedek Elokim, the image of God. Love your brother as you love yourself. The Torah keeps emphasizing those values, and that's why Jews, throughout generations, even if they were involved in wars, or they never went to extreme. They never reached extremes as other religions. Even now in Israel, even now that we saw this extreme case of Tag Mahir and burning houses and all that, they are condemned by the majority of the population. And when the question was presented to leading rabbis of the national religious community, meaning those are rabbis who are serving the army, who live in settlements, who are the main victims of terrorist attacks, and the question was presented to them, can we use collective punishment? Let's say we know that a terrorist came from a certain village. Are we allowed to carbon bomb the village? Resounding no. They all said, you cannot do that. You're only allowed to kill for self-defense. You cannot kill innocent people. So I think that is as much Marmy as I struggle with this question of the Midianites and the Amalekites and how the Torah says to kill them. I say if over the course of 2,000-3,000 years we've evolved to say this is not what I don't believe these are the core values of the Torah, it means the Torah planted a certain seed that eventually affected us in a certain way. So we still have to find an answer to those specific stories, but somewhere there in the Torah there's a message to tell us this is not what we should be.
Show and then keep because of the